All right, welcome everyone. We're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we're here, of course, for our podcast.
Number 29.
And these are the 10 things we look for in a story.
Yes.
They are. But before we get into that real quick,
That's
we have to
right.
give a VIP shout out. One of our newest members on the Patreon, also in Discord as well, Bijushin. I'm sorry if I said that name wrong, but it's Bijushin. And thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot, dude.
Yes.
Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
And welcome to the Discord as well.
Yeah, it's great to have you.
All right. So these first 10
Yes.
things, what's the first thing, Jake?
Well, before we get into this, it's a good point to mention that these are our personal 10 things that we look for in stories. This is not like what a story needs to have to be objectively the best. These are just 10 things that we get really excited when we see in stories.
Right.
The first one is a simple, interesting premise that it sticks to over the course of the story.
Right.
Something simple, that way you know when it's executing on it properly. It does its thing and it does it well.
Right. One of the things when we say sticks to it is that a lot of stories will execute a premise, but will change costumes every once in a while and rewrite the premise without really telling you. So all of a sudden you're like, wait, where's the story going? Why is it going in this direction? It doesn't seem to have its head screwed on right with regards to the direction of the story.
That's usually seen most in sequels.
Yes, very much so. Also, one of the things that you'll find is these stories that have these simple premises doesn't necessarily mean that it's unoriginal.
Right.
A lot of these premises can be very original, or maybe a combination of two cliche things morphed into something pretty interesting.
Yes.
And that's what makes it interesting, but it can still be simple in that it's easy to understand on the get-go.
Right. You should be able to, this should be something where if you want to tell someone about this show, you can just give them one sentence and get their interest.
Right. Moving on to the next thing. This one is a kind of a combination of two things that we both really appreciate in stories, is memorable characters with contradictions.
Yes.
Now, when we say memorable, it's very all-encompassing.
Yeah,
The characters,
there's lots of ways you can do it.
There's the characters that stick with us that we'll remember forever, and that's something that you can't really know about a story, before you get into it.
Right, because it's not some sort of objective thing. It's a very subjective concept.
Right.
But having contradictions is a great way to do that quickly.
Yes.
A lot of times you can get a character that's memorable, even if they are, at the start, just a contradiction.
Right.
Someone that's this, but also this, or this and that.
Right. A great example would be Hinata and Kageyama. They're both extremely skilled at their specific area of volleyball. But Kageyama has so much to learn about volleyball as a whole. Hinata is skilled at very specific areas, but not in others. He can jump really high, but his receiving is pretty much crap. He has all the positivity and enthusiasm of a player that...
But he doesn't have the experience.
Right, but he doesn't have the experience. Yeah. And you'll see these contradictions crop up a lot in those characters that just seem to have near flawless... dimension to them. I would say execution, but I was going to make a point here about depth. There's some characters actually from some live action shows, like Breaking Bad, for instance. Walter White is a prime example of a memorable character with a contradiction. He's a high school chemistry teacher that also is a meth dealer.
Right.
There's that really, really stark contradiction there, and because it exists, a lot of people go, Oh, yeah. That's interesting.
And if you think about it...
And that kind of ties into the first
premise.
part.
Yep.
It's a very simple, interesting premise that it sticks to. And the main character and or the characters in the cast having that aspect of being memorable, but also having a very clear contradiction adds to that.
A lot of times character archetypes even can be boiled down to simply a contradiction.
Yep.
The tsundere, for instance. The person that is, mean, but actually has a heart of gold. You know, or the kudere, the person who doesn't talk much, but they actually have a lot to say. That sort of thing.
Exactly.
Now, this one
is huge.
Huge.
I know you guys have heard us talk about this a lot, but in particular, we want to focus on the main character, the MC, the protagonist. The main character needs to have a strong why.
Right.
And this is something that we would come close to saying is more objectively... is more on the objective side of things.
Right. And because even if... Here's the thing. And this can go for any character,
yes,
but it's especially important for the main character because it's basically any time that you have the perspective character in some sort of story, right? They should be the one moving it forward in whatever story you're talking about, whether it's some subplot in which they're the main character of that little story, or the actual main character where in the overarching story they're the one pushing it forward, because there needs to be a sense of impetus to things, even if you do not agree with the why of the main character. The fact that they care about it deeply, that will, one, make the writing process much simpler because you always know what should happen. And it will also make them way more interesting because then the audience will be able to feel like they understand them, even if they don't necessarily like them.
Right. A great example of this is the brothers, Edward and Al, in Full Metal Alchemist and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Yes.
Their why is constantly reiterated and shown throughout the series as they try to get their original bodies back. Everything that they do throughout the story, and this is another aspect of why Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is so good because it has dual main characters, is towards that. And then there are things that try to pull them away from it. But their why keeps pulling pulling them back on track. And the main character having this, we just want to say, is something that's actually a lot rarer than you'd think. Because, especially in TV shows like anime, the MC doesn't need to have the strongest why. They can have a decent why, just an average why, and they'll carry the story enough. But oftentimes they are not the full main pilot on the story's movement.
And that doesn't mean you have to have someone like a main character who knows what they want, right? You Ancient Magus Bride, that's one where you have a main character who doesn't really know what they want and isn't very assertive of their desires. But the idea of having something that the main character wants is very, very important because stories exist because there's conflict. If there's nothing that the main character wants that will help them push past the conflict or even create the conflict. Because usually the problem comes in where the main character wants something, and this could also be the bad guy. The bad guy wants something, but then there's an obstacle in their way, and they have to work to overcome that.
Therefore, conflict.
Exactly. Now, this next one is one that I will watch a movie or a show or read a book or whatever, and just this will make it enough for me a lot of the times. I don't want this to be the only thing, but when there's like that one moment that just hits you really hard in the emotions, whether that's from like some WTF crazy twist or like something that just makes you bawl your eyes out, having one of those
is really good for a story.
Oh boy, it puts the story on a whole nother level, like automatically.
One of the things that happens in really big emotional moments is you have basically this climactic build-up towards something because of, say, the main character's why. And it's the capitulation of not only their development, but maybe an arc in the story as well. And then something goes slightly off from what you'd expect. Or it is exactly what you'd expect, and it's all this positive emotion reinforcement. Haikyuu is a great example of where we've seen both extremes. Extreme positivity as something goes exactly the way the characters want, and has some things where it doesn't go the way they want. And the emotion that comes from that is so powerful that it elevates the show to something else. But also, like you said, this is something that's more subjective. This is something that, for me, I need those previous things with the characters to be set in order for these emotional moments to hit as strongly.
And that's why like we ordered these in a very particular order because the emotional moments, when you've got that main character with a really strong why, when you have other memorable characters with contradictions and stuff like that, and you have a simple premise that is interesting and easy to follow that the story sticks to, then you can have that climactic moment just makes sense where you know it's coming but you also can't wait to see it, and then it happens,
like the ending of Wolf Children.
Or so many different moments in A Silent Voice, or like little things like that. Like if you look at a lot of our favorite stories, you'll see like, oh yeah, they have these things, and that's just why we love them so much.
And moving on to the next one, this one is something that's really on the subjective side because it's hard to quantify, but we like it when a story does something new. Even though there's technically nothing new out there.
It's kind of all been done before. But you can have something that does something just that little bit differently, or the context of it is different, or something like that. And that's why it oftentimes ties into the previous things, because you could have a character that does something new, or like in the case of, say, A Silent Voice, it's like it's a drama, but it's about bullying, and it's like, oh yeah, there you go. There aren't a lot of stories about that actually like really go into it. Things like that can really set them apart. And this is one of those ones where, like, especially for me, because I'm writing, right?
You're a writer,
I'm a writer. I'm making stories. This is where I'll watch an anime sometimes, like, even if I know it's not that good,
right?
Because it has that thing that I think is that gem, amidst the mud, right?
And because you're trying to absorb all of the things that are new for you,
exactly, so I can learn and all
your
that
experience.
Stuff. Yep.
Yeah, and that's something that I sometimes approach. I'd say not as much as you, but generally when I'm wanting to see how this simple, interesting premise, like in the beginning, is done, because I can see, this is a unique premise. It is simple, unique, and interesting. How does that work? I'm going to see how that was formulated. And after I've watched it and gotten the entertainment value out of it, I'll kind of deconstruct it in my mind and go, was there anything new? Oh, yeah, there was. Points 3 and 5. Those were really interesting. Okay. Yeah. This one is kind of tied into something new, but I think that this is something that's particular to me because I'm a really big sci-fi fantasy fan, is I need the world to be immersive. Now, Jacob, the world can be immersive and it can still be the real world, right?
Yes. That is a very important thing. Fantasy and sci-fi have sort of like an advantage on this because you're actually usually going to a completely fundamentally different world.
Right.
But it doesn't need to be fantasy and sci-fi, and a lot of times fantasy and sci-fi will kind of take the easy way out because they're like, okay, but this isn't actually the real world, so it should be inherently a bit more interesting and a bit more immersive. But then you can have things like, say, like Toradora, for instance, right? Where the world is high school. That's nothing new. But
with pubescent teens who are interacting with each other in different emotional levels and such.
Exactly.
And that's the world.
That is the world. The world is being a pubescent teen and dealing with all the craziness that happens during that time.
Yeah.
So there you go. Even though it's something that's very simple and, not exactly like creative, it's immersive.
Right. One of the things that immersion also means to me is the ability to be invested in it. I would say a lot of things in shows that move into the sci-fi fantasy area will gloss over this area of immersion for the world just because it's different. Which, let's be honest, guys, how many of you are tired of Lord of the Rings getting ripped off with dwarves, orcs, and elves running around?
But no halflings because they're not cool enough.
Yeah, exactly. Or how many of you are tired of Star Trek or Star Wars being ripped off with no real thought put into it? It's those sci-fis and fantasies where they get you immersed into the world, but also invested into the world. I would say a great example of a fantasy series we're watching right now, Hunter x Hunter, is starting to get us with that, with its applications of Nen, with its applications of things like Greed Island, with its aspects of, parties moving around in the world like the Phantom Troop. It's things like that where you have ancillary and kind of auxiliary moving forces within the world that get you extra immersed into it, but also invested into seeing, okay, let's see where this new aspect of the world takes us.
And if you think about it, the reason that, like, say, Hunter x Hunter, for instance, is such an immersive world, it's because of how much the characters care in each different way. Whether it's Gon finding his dad, or the Phantom Troop and what they're trying to do, or, Killua just wanting to hang out with his new friend, right? Those are the kinds of things that make us really care about the world. So even if it's not the most original thing, if you have the characters go through it, have the characters really care, and explore it in some good, like, focused depth, you can get a very immersive world.
And this one I definitely want to throw to you. Quotable lines. You are the king of dialogue. And one of your favorite shows, Black Lagoon, is probably a great example of this.
Absolutely. I was not going to mention that, though. I was going to mention something else that is not an anime, but has very much an anime feel to it. And that is Fifth Element. Fifth Element has some of the best quotable lines I have ever seen, right?
Like, so true.
Like, I'll quote them to Caleb and forget that it's from Fifth Element. I'll be like, wait, what's that from? This is my personal favorite.
Multipass.
Multipass. Yeah, chicken, good chicken, right? All these things that are they're just great, right? And one of the things that I think is one of the reasons why lines can be so quotable is because there will be that logic to them where you're like, okay, it makes sense that they would say these things. There's like a certain like wit to them that usually doesn't exist in real life because no one's that good at banter.
Yeah, one of the things that you'll find is very rare with this quotable lines thing is you'll rarely hear people quote exposition. I will tell you that quotable lines, I would say the best quotable exposition out there is long ago the four nations lived together in harmony, because there's this aspect of humor to it in that this little girl is talking about this horrible thing, whereas in Lord of the Rings you don't quote Galadriel's talk about the great rings.
Sometimes I quote her like One Ring speech of, instead of a Dark Lord you would have a queen,
right?
But the real reason that we like these quotable lines is because they're attached to these great characters.
Yes, exactly.
And it's this sort of yin-yang thing where quotable lines can help characters become more endearing, but also characters with, say, contradictions or whatever are oftentimes where these quotable lines come from. In the case of Fifth Element, there's a, Zorg, right? Who, as far as setup goes and name and everything, is a completely cliche, uninteresting bad guy.
Yep.
Yet there's points where, like, say, you're a monster, Zorg.
I know.
Things like that. Or, you know what I really want? A killer. Cold and clean, methodical and thorough. Now, a real killer would have asked about the little red button on the bottom. And then it just...
Oh, my gosh.
Things like that. Those are the things that just make you take a character and be like, You are a gem. I love you so much. Devil is a part-timer. Why do we love Ashia so much?
Yeah, because his lines are so memorable. His lines
great.
are so quotable.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I love Avatar: The Last Airbender so much is every character speaks as if they are that character. Right. There's very few times where I'll quote lines where it feels like the author, the writer, the mangaka, the creator is trying to speak to me through that character.
Yeah.
I will say that there are a lot of comedies that succeed in the quotable lines aspect because they sometimes don't ever go into the exposition side of things.
Right, because they're a comedy, right?
And I would just say that this is an aspect of where exposition is very much important in its specific areas. But if you can show, not tell, you will end up with a story with more quotable lines. Yep. Just our 2 cents on that.
Yeah.
All right, this one is a big one for me. This is complete story arcs. Now, when I say complete, I don't mean just the end, like where they finish. Right. I want the beginning, all those middle points, and the end. I want a rounded, full story. And this is something that is very subjective, I would say, from the standpoint of, for me, because I like linear stories and I have a little bit of trouble with the episodic stories, because what ends up happening is the arcs within themselves don't ever really start. You have a bunch of little mini story arcs that might start and end, and then those ones don't have a middle, really.
Sure.
There's not enough time for really a conflict to take place. Some things can pull this off.
Yeah, and it's awesome when they do it. It is fantastic. But a lot of the times it's a lot harder in episodic stories because you just have less time to work with. Yeah. So you don't get those lingering moments or the super strong beginning because you've done 10 already and you're losing out on ideas of how to do it creatively.
Right. And also, I put plural on this, complete story arcs, because I don't want people to think that it's just the
it has to be a
beginning.
One-shot.
Yeah, just the beginning, middle, and end of a story within like a show's plot. It could be a character's story arc.
Yep.
It could be the arc of just one location in a story.
Right.
All of those things having their very clear beginning, middle, end adds a lot of, I would say, simplicity to the structure, but also aids the creator on the execution side of things, because then they're not leading the audience down a bunch of dead ends and then trying to reroute them back onto the original plot.
And one of the things that really makes the audience potentially hate your story, like not just not like it, but actively take up arms against it.
The ending.
Like lynch mob. Well, not the ending.
Oh.
This is beyond the ending. Yes, the ending can do it, but it's when you basically promise them something in their mind, and then you don't
deliver.
Fulfill it. You don't deliver on it.
That's way worse than the endings. Yeah.
Like that was one of the main reasons why people didn't like The Last Jedi so much, amongst its other problems or whatever. Things where if you get into a story and you're like, oh, this is going to be great. I love that this is some crazy, like, intense thriller. Right. And then it turns out to be like a slice of life.
Right. Another aspect of this is when you have a story that genre switches middle show. You have to be very careful that the beginning of the arc set up that switch.
Right. Yep.
Madoka Magica is a show that does this extraordinarily well.
Yes.
And is probably one of the most concise, near perfect, complete story arcs for the plot and also the main two characters. You know which two characters I'm talking about.
And if you want to look at how this can be done badly, look at episodic, usually Western shows, like cop dramas and things like that.
Yep.
Because what they'll do is they'll be like, okay, well, we want to have this go on as long as possible, so we can't have the characters actually like get in a relationship. We can't have, this happen. We can't have that happen just yet. So they'll put it off for a long time, and a lot of times it just won't end up happening, or at least not satisfactorily.
Yeah. This next one here, I'd say very much ties into having complete story arcs because those generally have a little bit more depth. But rewatchability.
Yep.
It's a big deal for us, Jacob.
It is.
What is our favorite show of all time?
Avatar: The Last Airbender.
How many times have we rewatched Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Cannot count.
More than a dozen.
Yeah, more than
least.
A dozen each. Yeah,
each.
And the thing is, rewatchability is super subjective because,
very subjective.
Like, for instance, Toradora, one of my absolute favorite shows ever. I've watched that show like 5 times through. I love it. Every time I watch it, I get something new out of it. But then other people might be like, Toradora, it was great, but I just can't stand rewatching it because I know what happens, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that can happen. So that's why these other things that have come before it, the quotable lines, the emotional moments, the characters, the whys, the interesting premise that's simple and easy to understand. Those are the kinds of things that can add together to make it more rewatchable because a lot of times this usually happens when there will be like some crazy twist that happens.
Yep.
You'll be like, wow, that was amazing. That was this great thriller. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time. And then when you think about going back and rewatching it, you're like, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And then you watch it and you actually get into it and you're like, oh.
Right.
Okay.
A great example of this would be the show Lost. A lot of people really enjoyed the journey up to it. I am one of those people.
Me too.
And then the ending happened. And that completely killed the rewatchability, I would say, for a lot of people, including myself. I really enjoy watching individual episodes of Lost over again. I do not think about rewatching the show again. And this also ties into another thing. Why you guys have gotten on us for a bit for liking a lot of short shows. It is easier to rewatch something if it is short.
That's very true.
No real surprise there, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If you have a great show and it goes for a long time and it fulfills all these things and ends up being rewatchable, you got yourself a masterpiece in our book, at least.
Absolutely.
And that's why something like Avatar: The Last Airbender, which has over 60 episodes, is something incredible because that's 20 hours at least just to watch the whole thing.
Right. Yeah.
And that amount of time expenditure for something that we would rewatch, 15 times potentially.
That's a lot of time.
That's a lot of time.
That's a lot of time.
Yeah.
Now, this next one is one of the biggest ones for me.
Yeah.
And
pretty big for me too.
And that's any time that you have a story that keeps you thinking about it after it's done.
Right.
That is incredible. A lot of times that's done through like transcendent themes and stuff.
Exactly.
But that can also be done through other things too. Like say leaving something ambiguous. Yeah. What happened here? Is this person, are they dead or are they still alive? What are they actually thinking in this moment? Et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Having moments of contradiction within a character's decision making, specifically around the end, in my opinion, is one of the biggest ways you can get this type of discussion going.
Right.
I really enjoyed the movie V for Vendetta.
Oh, yeah.
Loved the discussion that came from it.
Yep.
Wachowski brothers I'm a fan of, so The Matrix, the first one, is a great example of this as well. But in anime, I would say it's actually more so the ones with really powerful characters that keep me talking about it long.
Yes, yeah,
long
because it usually has something to do with the characters. And here's the thing: this is why this is so important. When you have something a story that keeps you thinking about it after you're done, right?
Right.
We go to stories to escape in some way, not necessarily in a bad way, but
Right.
to basically enjoy that story, right?
Yep.
And if we're able to enjoy that story while we're there watching it or reading it, awesome.
Yeah.
Great. That's fantastic. When we go away from it, when we put it down and it stays with us,
Yeah.
we're still in that world.
Right.
You know, we're still thinking about how the four nations live together in harmony or, whatever, right? That's when you have something really special.
Really good.
Like, oh boy, like because like say V for Vendetta, we will regularly, when we watch that movie, spend more time afterwards just talking about
it.
stuff that the movie brings up than we will actually watching the movie itself.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
One of the coolest things about our channel as a whole is that most of the shows that we've watched, in fact, I would say pretty much all of them, have generated that type of discussion from it.
Right.
Because the aspects of these stories in particular have some thing in them that goes beyond just the initial face value within the story. And that's why you brought up transcendent themes there.
Yep.
That's something I really wanted to make sure we talked about in this, was because the themes of a story in, say, Avatar: The Last Airbender can have the immediate impact within the character development and the character interactions and all this stuff. But when you think about things that Iroh said, for instance, and it actually changes a little bit of the way you live life, that's something where you go, wait a minute, like this is really super subjective. Like it's going to be different for different people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But that's something where for me, I go, that story now has extra value to me. And the strange thing is it's a little bit biased because it bleeds out into the rest of the story.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. For me, one of the ones that hit me the hardest with this was Wolf Children.
Yeah.
Because
it did.
It made me think like, oh man, I don't appreciate my mom enough.
Whoa,
the whole struggle of being a parent and raising children. Like,
oh my
wow,
gosh.
that is amazing, right?
Yeah.
And those kinds of things, that's where a story can go from being great to being like the one that you become evangelical about, and you're like, okay, the world will not be right until everyone everywhere has seen this movie or read this book or watched this show because it is that good. And here, let's sit down right now and watch it because it's that good. And I'm just going to stare at you awkwardly the entire time while we watch it because I want to see your response.
I'm with that. I'm like that with a lot of things as well. But it's fun when you actually get someone to watch it like that as well.
Yep.
So, guys, that's our 10 items here. We're going to move on into the Q&A now. The first question is from Jason. Is asking, what do you think Hunter x Hunter does that separates itself from other battle shonen? Would you like to take that one, or would you like me to?
Sure. I would say there's two major things. One is like the obvious power system. It's an actual system where there's rules and stuff. So when they resolve things with it, it is a lot more satisfying because oh, hey, that's smart, as opposed to, oh, they just, came up with something.
Right.
And the other one, and this is something that they put on very thick at the very beginning of the show, which is the only thing you can expect is the unexpected.
Right.
And
very
almost
true.
and it's not even unexpected in that sense because it will be the unexpected. They won't even psych you out and do something like normal every once in a while. Like always the unexpected.
The unexpected.
Whereas and that's something that most battle shonens don't really do, so the fact that Hunter x Hunter did that and did it so like to such an extreme really helps.
Right. And I would say the only thing I would add to that would be that the main characters have the power, have agency power outside of plot structure. Meaning that they are not confined by the plot structure within their their choices are not confined by the structure of the plot.
Right. Hunter x Hunter is a discovery written story. Yeah.
A discovery written story, yes. Which is insanely hard to do, by the way.
Right. Insanely
hard.
Especially for a shonen.
Yeah.
For a battle shonen. Because stuff just happens or doesn't happen.
Yep. All right, this one is from Sean Wang. What anime series would you recommend to a friend who hasn't watched anime at all?
Ooh, this depends on the friend and their tastes.
Yes, it's very difficult. I would say if we wanted to give them a positive experience, I would want them to not even watch technically anime. I would want them to watch just Avatar: The Last Airbender and see if that kind of just feel good adventure coming of age story just works with them. Right. But if they're ready to watch anime,
I would ask them what they feel up for, like genre wise, and then based on that I would give them something like Attack on Titan or My Hero Academia or I don't know, Torador or Silent Voice or Your Name or something like that.
Yeah, I might actually go with that route and have them watch a movie, like a Ghibli film.
Yeah,
I think
it's hard to go wrong
that keeps their investment down low,
right?
Because you don't want them to get you don't want them to get to feel locked into a show that they don't like.
Exactly,
because people's tastes are so varied and all over the place. I would rather them feel like they wasted an hour and a half than they wasted 7.5 hours.
Right. Yep.
But I don't think they're going to, because anime is fantastic. So
exactly.
That's what I do.
Happy Pants 101. Do you think anime becomes more mainstream than America? America will make a return to producing hand-drawn animated films, and as anime grows, we will see American animated shows and movies becoming more like Avatar: The Last Airbender instead of stuff like Family Guy or Flavor of the Week children's cartoons.
Ooh, I have a great answer for this.
Yes.
The spectrum will broaden. So one of the things that Avatar... the reason why I'd say Avatar came to be was there was not as high demand for cartoon shows of that variety, so it wanted to stand out as being something great. So they took extra effort to designing the martial arts of the bending moves, like choreography. Like that kind of stuff, very high tier. What we're going to see, I think, is a lot more low tier stuff and occasionally more and more high tier stuff. Yeah. It's just going to be a broader and broader spectrum, which means good things, because then it'll be more accessible as a medium, just animation in general.
Because if you think about it, Avatar: The Last Airbender was not the first cartoon show that tried to do something along those lines. That exact thing, sure. But the thing is that it did it really well.
Right.
It was a diamond in the rough, right?
Yes, very true.
So we won't be getting things like Avatar: The Last Airbender all the time.
No.
But we will end up getting more stuff that's like it, and
with a lot of attention to detail and a lot of
know,
production value put behind it.
Right.
Me asks, will you consider doing reviews of anime? Yes, we'll consider it. Yeah. But they add a little bit of clarification here. Not necessarily weekly, maybe bi-weekly or monthly. I think that's a good idea, since it'll give you an opportunity to talk in depth about shows you have already seen, so you can't produce a reaction video about it, like Toradora, Code Geass, ReZero, Death Note, Bleach, Erase, etc. Additional question. Well, hold on. Let's do that. So the answer is we consider it, and it's always been kind of in the back of our minds.
Right.
But it's something that we would never switch to switch to doing for the channel.
Right. That's, if anything, that's kind of one of the things that we like to be able to have to throw into the podcasts and stuff, is so that way we can talk about these shows that we absolutely love and hopefully get some people to watch them, without saying like, hey, this is the condensed, this is all we want to say about this show.
This is Avatar: The Last Airbender in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Probably
'Cause
not
we could do that.
Probably not going to happen, but if anything, we might look at it more in the future once we branch out and start doing other types of videos as well.
Yeah.
Additional question, what do you guys think about old shows getting sequels years after they finish? Code Geass and Steins Gate are meant to eventually get new seasons despite ending 8 and 10 years ago. Yeah, so
this is a mixed bag, because
very mixed bag.
In the case of those two, Code Geass has the perfect ending, so why it's getting a sequel, I have no idea.
No idea.
Steins Gate, this will be I almost see this as more of like a spin-off than a sequel.
It's kind of a spin-off, because it sounds like it's going to be some kind of alternate timeline, which, spoiler alert, Steins Gate has time travel in it. So that makes sense.
Right.
The main thing I see a lot these days is a lot of nostalgia sequels.
Which aren't necessarily a bad thing.
And they can be good. They can be good. And so my thing is, I test them all, especially if it's something that I'm nostalgic with. If Avatar: The Last Airbender did a sequel show, another one, I don't care how much showboating and money grabbing there is involved, I will watch it. It's kind of a problem, but I would say that if anything, if you think it's a problem, you need to watch more original stuff. Yeah. And just put your money where your mouth is, essentially. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to call people to action in any specific way. I'm just saying, it doesn't really bother us that much.
Because, there are shows that I'm still holding out for a sequel.
What was it? Spice and Wolf Season...
Spice and Wolf Season 3, Haruhi Season 3, Black Lagoon Season 3. There's a lot of Season 3s.
And those are more like adaptations than true sequels.
Sure, because
the content
there is
after that already
there
exists.
is actual source material.
But Code Geass and Steins Gate don't have content.
Well,
after
technically,
this.
with Haruhi and Black Lagoon, I would actually want an original sequel rather than an adaptation sequel, just so that they can resolve everything. Epic awesome.
Okay. Moving on. Nova Writer asks, have you guys started reading any manga as of late, or are you not as interested in reading manga? Not as interested in reading manga.
Not as much. I did read the Silent Voice manga. I have the whole collection, and it is amazing. You should actually read it.
Okay, cool. Next question's from Sydney. I wanted to ask if there was a certain type of music, maybe even the anime OST department, that you listen to that helps you do something.
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely. Everything.
Awaken My Masters is great for working
Oh my
out.
gosh. Yes. And you hear that and you're about to do push. Oh my gosh. Suddenly it doesn't even matter. You just pose harder into the breathing and yeah.
And when we get around to watching Berserk eventually, there's another song I'm really excited for you to see. I particularly love also Crone whenever I'm writing. Crone from Guilty Crown. Mm-hmm. That song is amazing. And then, of course, Lost My Pieces is fantastic and pretty much
from Toradora.
From Toradora. And pretty much the whole Silent Voice soundtrack.
The next question is from Thomas Roque. How good is your knowledge of 60s, 70s, and 80s music? I'm asking because of JoJo's.
Not good. Yeah.
I would say that it is stuck on some of the more mainstream stuff. We recognize something like, a Led Zeppelin song or something.
Maybe.
No, I probably would. But pretty weak. It. So if anything, when, we're seeing things, come up as references in JoJo's, we're a little bit like, well, crap. We're a bit culturally unclassy with regards to those types of things.
Yes.
But hey, we'll get classier as we watch JoJo's. So
that's right.
There we go. Next question from Bastian Solinger. Will you try to get a slot for a live-action show, and what are your favorite live-action shows / movies? We did Game of Thrones previously. We tried to keep one open for Game of Thrones.
Right.
But right now, I'm trying to get Jacob into the idea of us doing Westworld and Legion. Those are the two live-action shows that I actually care about right now. To be honest, I don't care about a lot of live-action stuff right now.
Anime's kind of ruined us for that, but there are exceptions.
There are exceptions. Yeah. I would say that the only thing really big favorites right now with regards to shows is Game of Thrones.
Okay.
In particular, live action kind of got blurred out of my mind the last 12 months. So I don't really I don't really remember even watching a lot of these live action shows. I would say Firefly is probably
I was going to mention
I thought you
that
were
one.
Going to say that.
Yeah. Firefly is great. Stranger Things is also great. I didn't like the second season as much, but it's
because of one episode.
Because of one episode, really. But
so salty. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I get very salty.
Yeah, I would say there's a bunch of live action stuff coming out right now that's pretty good. Black Mirror is really good. It's not really a story show. It's more of a...
That's an episodic.
It's an episodic thing. But yeah, I don't watch live action stuff for the story generally ever.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
That's why I watch anime. All right. Daria
Lappy.
Yes.
Yeah. If you guys could watch an anime that hasn't been done yet, whether genre or just a general idea, what would you want it to be about and why?
Okay. So, guys... I really want an Ultimate Frisbee anime. I am dead serious. I will push for this to happen until my dying days, because when I watched Haikyuu and realized how little take this with a grain of salt, but how little the volleyball really mattered. Listen to what I'm saying. Haikyuu is so good.
It could be any sport.
It could be any sport. Literally, the characters are what is so good in Haikyuu.
Yep.
That it doesn't... Volleyball's great. I'm into volleyball now. I find it interesting. But it could have been Ultimate Frisbee. And the idea in my head where I took the Haikyuu characters and imprinted them into an Ultimate Frisbee game, it would work so well.
He's basically just fantasizing about one possible way he could think to make Haikyuu better.
I've had dreams about this. It's so beautiful in my head. But anyway, that's what I would do.
So the one that I would do would be something that is kind of along the lines of a mecha, but that involves like personal suits of armor that are not like massive, like lumbering behemoth things.
It sounds familiar, like something you're writing.
Yeah, almost like something I'm writing. The other thing that I would want to see an anime about is sort of maybe stylized, historical fiction kind of a deal of Qing Shi. If you hadn't, if you
tell everyone about your secret idea.
Well, no, no. But
okay.
But basically, it would just be an amazing story that I would think would make an amazing anime.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, look her up if you don't know.
She's one of those people that's larger than life. Like you'll like look at some of the stuff she did and you'll be like, wow.
What?
Okay. That's
badass
kind of
female
ridiculous.
character to the umpteenth degree.
Yes.
Final question from also Daria Lapi. What is a cliche, whether in anime, movies, TV shows, etc., that you think is overused but still works and has the same effectiveness and impact?
You go first.
Well, I think we've answered this question before. I think I remember what your answer was, and I almost want to use it so that you'll have to think up another great
Okay,
one.
go for it. Go for it.
I really love the old teacher cliche. Like, the thing is that it's super overused. The character that passes on the torch to the younger main character of such. I really, really love when it's done well. One of my favorite characters of all time is Uncle Iroh.
Yeah.
Note, he is not the old wizened elder for the main character. Like, he's not for Aang, he's for the side main character.
They keep it fresh.
Yeah. When that cliche is done in a fresh way, it's so good. I love it.
Now, okay, this is why I wanted you to go first. Because I'm going to deconstruct this question a little bit.
Oh, shoot.
So the whole idea of a cliche and being used versus still working and the effectiveness and the impact and stuff like that, cliches exist for a reason.
Yes.
Right? They exist
here we go.
because they
All
can
about
be
to get
done and they can
schooled.
be done very, very, very well. The idea of a cliche being overused basically happens when people start using the cliche without thinking about why that cliche worked in the first place. The idea of the mentor and stuff, right? Nowadays, if I watch some fantasy story and I see some mentor, I'm like, okay, what episode are they going to die? Is it going to be around episode 8 or episode 12?
Yep.
When is it going to happen? So
said.
Those sorts of things. The mentor one is a great one. But then there are other things like the whole tsundere cliche, right? I like tsunderes when they are done well. I am quite fond. But they're also one of the most grating, annoying things I've ever seen when they're done badly. Because people will take the cliche, the trope, and they'll just sort of put it in there as a cookie-cutter, copy-paste deal, as opposed to thinking about why we like it in the first place. A lot of times the whole idea of the tsundere could just as easily be applied to a grandpa, curmudgeon-y old guy,
grandpa,
as it could be to, a high school girl in ponytails, right?
Yep.
So those sorts of things are what I look for with tropes. But I am fond of the tsundere one when it's done well, whether it's in a high school girl or in a curmudgeon-y old man.
Cliches became cliches for a reason. Respect the cliche. Hashtag respect the cliche.
You can use the cliche, but just remember to look at why it became a cliche in the first place.
And guys, that's going to be it for the end of our podcast. Thank you very much for sticking around. If you'd like to ask us questions, put them in the comments down below, and we'll answer them in our next week's podcast. But until then, we're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all next time.